There we go. We will be popping this up on the website at the end, so those who missed it can still watch. So how many have we got? We've got 19. Might just give it another minute. I see a few people in their cars. Thanks for joining. It's tricky. If I just ask everyone to mute, just because we will have quite a few people on this call, so if everyone can mute, that would be great. That way there's no feedback coming through. And if anyone has any questions, we will have time at the end for some questions. If you do want to have a question at the end, just raise your hand on your virtual hand and we'll get through to you. If not, you can pop it in the chat and I can read it out if you're not comfortable talking on the screen, which is fine. If you do have to leave early and you had a question, just pop it in the message chat and I'll make sure that we get to that. And then when you can watch the recording, or I'll make a note to send you an answer to the question that you asked. Welcome, more people popping in. All right, we'll probably get a few latecomers, so they're just going to have to catch up. All right, I'd love to introduce Rob. Rob is here to give you an idea of what his course is about, what to expect. So let's have a listen and then we can have a chat afterwards. So thanks, everybody. Over to you, Rob.
Amazing. Thanks, Kate. Yeah, welcome, everyone. Thanks for taking the time. It's Wednesday evening, so I'm gonna just show my face, and then I'll share my screen, and I guess there's some imagery as I speak that will maybe help us land in the content. So I'll share my screen now. So hopefully, Kate, let me know. Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So I'll just share I'll do the screen mode. Okay, and I need to there we go. Okay, cool. So you should see the full screen now. Is that right?
That's correct. Can everyone else see that? Get a little nod from everyone. Thumbs up. Perfect. Thanks.
Yep. Yeah. Cool. Okay, amazing. Yeah, so I've got you guys for the next hour. And I'm going to walk you through this offering from Metavision called Somatic Ecopsychotherapy. And as Kate said, if there's any questions, maybe if you could just hold them till the end, and I'll save some time at the end just to field those questions. And as ever, I'd like to start with an acknowledgement. And it's an acknowledgement of country, and to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the country I walk and wander and live on. And they're the Darug and Gundungurra people. And the wisdom that I'm drawing on in this program, the wisdom that's being offered in this program really draws on the wisdom of First Nations people, certainly in Australia, but also globally, and the wisdom of deep inner listening, listening to country, to community, to the body, and also in some ways to the dreaming itself. So I pay my respects to that lineage that this course is situated in. I also want to acknowledge the rank I hold as a white fella on this country, in the world today. And the way that I hold blind spots in my wisdom as a white fella. So I invite you, as you listen to the talk, to stay close to yourself, and also moving into a program such as this, always to check into the content, whether it feels and sits right with you. You're always the best litmus of whether content is right and a program is offering that which is right for you. I'd also like to start with an attunement, just as a way that we can drop into the body. So if you're not already comfortable, I invite you to get comfortable in your chair. And some of you may wish to grab a pillow or a blanket and just to place it on your lap or to hold it against your chest. And it's just a way of inviting slowness even before we get into the content. And I invite you to feel the cushion or the blanket against yourself, to notice how that feels in the body if you're holding it. And I invite you also here to do something that I often do with my clients and in programs. It's called orienting. And I'll just get you to gently take your head over to the left-hand side, so it's in alignment with your left shoulder. And then I'll get you to let your eyes travel slowly to the right-hand side of the room. And just to let your eyes travel and your head following. And maybe your eyes want to linger on certain objects in the space that you're in. And you might just let them do that. You're just taking the space you're in and noticing how it feels when you do that in the body. Perhaps there's a sense of slowness that comes with that. Maybe a sense of spaciousness. And just to let your body have that. Maybe in the looking here, you're noticing there's no lions or tigers or bears. And just taking in the sense of familiarity and the sense of safety that's here. And I might get you now, if you haven't already, to close your eyes and just to feel your sit bones on the chair. To feel the contact there with your sit bones on the chair. Maybe sensing into the support in the chair. Perhaps the sense of being held here. And just letting yourself have that. You might also feel your feet connected to the earth. Your soles of the feet planted on the ground. And you might invite the support from the earth to flow up through your feet into your legs and into your body. And just letting the body have that. You might bring your awareness here also to your breath. And perhaps noticing the rise and fall of your chest as you breathe. And the in-breath, the rise of your chest. And the falling of your chest when you breathe out. And perhaps there's a sense here of also being carried by the breath. Being supported in the breath. And on the next out breath, you might bring your awareness inside the body. Maybe just sensing into the body as a whole. Sensing how the whole body feels here in the chair. Noticing if there's areas of tightness or tension. You might gently invite them to soften if they want to. And then you might bring your awareness into your throat area and just sense here what's in the throat, if anything. Maybe tightness or contraction or tingling. And just acknowledging whatever you sense there in the throat without needing to change it. And then you might drop your awareness down into your chest and heart area and sense what's there. And just acknowledging what you find there. And then perhaps dropping down into the belly and sensing what's in the belly. Perhaps in this space of awareness, there's a sense of spaciousness here now, maybe a sense of presence or calm. If there's anything that feels like it might be in the way of really fully arriving, you might just say hello to that, just to invite it in, to include it. And in this space of awareness, you might also bring to mind your intention for showing up to this talk this evening. Maybe asking yourself, what is it that brought me here tonight? Maybe inviting the sense of that intention to come into the body in whatever way it wants to come, maybe as a feeling or emotion or image. And taking your time in that invitation. Maybe there's a longing at the heart of you showing up tonight, or some question, some flavor to this program that called you. Noticing where it comes in the body as a feeling or emotion or image. Maybe noticing what shape or texture it has here, what color or temperature, what density. And maybe it's ever so subtle, but just trusting what comes there in your body when you invite it. And then you might see if you can gather the essence of that intention there in your body, maybe as a hand gesture or a symbol, a word. Gathering the essence of that, this thing that encouraged you to show up tonight. You might choose to acknowledge this intent, the intention and the longing in it, or the question in it. And you might also choose to offer what you've gathered there back to the land you're on, back to the earth in your own way. Perhaps knowing that some of this intention also comes from her. I'll talk a bit later about the interpenetration of consciousness. Some of this longing, some of this question, some of this intention may also be from the earth herself. And in your own way, you might now offer that back as if to say to her, I hear you. Maybe a hand on the heart there, or an open hand as an offer of giving back, as a gesture of reciprocity. In this era where we humans take so much from the earth. And when that feels complete, you might bring your awareness back to your sit bones on the chair. Sense the contact there. Sense your feet planted on the earth. Sensing the support in that. And then in your own time, you might gently open your eyes. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about this program, Somatic Ecopsychotherapy. And maybe to begin with something about why it came into being. And some of that telling is also the story of the ground of my own trauma and my own healing and my own wanderings on the land, my own somatic work. And like many of you, my childhood wasn't ideal, perhaps. It was war-torn, and I stuffed my traumas deep into the belly, into the recesses of the unconscious. And I lived from the neck up, actually, as if I didn't have a body. And I took on catastrophic self-beliefs and deficiency stories that felt like despair, that felt like addictive compulsion and isolation. And this was the shape of me. For most of my 20s, it was also a shape constellated around a deep sense of not belonging. I certainly didn't belong to myself. So much of myself I disavowed and pathologized and shunned. I didn't really feel like I belonged to any meaningful culture. And I certainly didn't feel like I belonged to land or the earth or to country. This one with a Canadian mother and a German dad born in London, who fled thousands of kilometers from his family of origin to Australia. I didn't feel like I really came from anywhere. I was severed from myself and my people. I was severed from my ancestors and lineage and ceremony and ways of being on country and on the land. And so this program emerges from that space. And Bill Plotkin writes about First Nations who describe people like me, the way I was then, as grey people, neither really truly alive nor dead. And that was the shape of me for most of my 20s and 30s. And then mystery called me inwards at some point. Some nameless longing to know a deeper truth about myself. And I gathered about myself Jungian writing and depth work and somatic work, dream work, entheogenic medicine, and long wanders on the land. And in time, the process and practice of self-inquiry, somatic inquiry, inner relationship sensing. And at some point, I vision quested on the land with Animas Valley Institute in the wilds of Wollomai, in these great sandstone cradled walls. I was cradled there on the land, and I had what Bill Plotkin describes as a soul encounter there, something unearthly, something deeply of the earth too, something both sublime and terrifying. And it's a remembering of one's deepest place and purpose in the web of life. Poet David Whyte describes it as the truth at the center of the image that we're born with. So I was this discombobulated one, severed from everything, from ancestors and body, from myself, the parts of my psyche I pathologized, certainly disconnected from country. And in those wilds of Wollomai, there was a reconnecting somehow, drawing on this deep lineage of wandering and somatic work. And in some ways, the earth also offered me something deeper of myself, this truth at the center of the image I was born with. Something in that place that was both of the soil of the wilds of Wollomai, but also the soil of my body and the soil of my psyche. Something there was remembered. And from that place, I walked onwards, my psyche remolded, and I began to lead a life of service, retraining as a psychotherapist, as a somatic inquiry teacher, as a focusing teacher. I trained with Australian College of Meditation and Mindfulness to teach that. And I worked with Scott Killaby in the States in somatic repression and addiction and trauma, and now facilitate that work. And I'm a lifelong student of the somatic spiritual school called the Diamond Approach. And so these many different strands that emerged after this radical, disruptive soul encounter are woven into this course. And that's why it's here, this weaving of somatic inquiry and ecopsychotherapy. And Metavision asked me to initially lead a program in ecotherapy, but it was really important that for me, it was also embodied, more embodied than maybe many of my ecotherapeutic wanderings alone might have been if I didn't have focusing and I didn't have somatic inquiry. So this process and program offers tools and frameworks and practices that help this white fella to reconnect to himself and to his body and to the land on which he walks. And there's a longing here to offer that and pay that forward in a way that I hope is beneficial to others. So this program is about coming home again. It's about coming home to the body and to the earth, the body of the earth. And so it feels in so many ways that the weaving of these two paradigms that are profoundly healing in their own right becomes synergistic. And so let's explore some of what lies ahead in this program. weaving these two paradigms together. And I'm conscious there's already a lot of words here tonight. And part of my longing here is also to give you a feeling sense of the silence and spaciousness that a program such as this might cultivate, and in which place we might find ourselves on the land, on wonders, on country. And this kind of inner knowing that can emerge in the silence of the body when we take pause. So the talk really is in two parts. There's the knowing part, which talks about frameworks and theory, and that's the what. And there's also the feeling part, and it's the tone and heart and spirit of a program such as this, and that's the why. Why pursue something like this? And we might start in the feeling place, the why, rather than the knowing place, which maybe is the dominant place in this logocentric patriarchal culture in which we live, that likes to box up knowing and facts and listicles into neatly packaged boxes that can be easily disseminated and understood and passed. So let's start a bit with the why, the feeling. And we might start by looking down on a program such as this from high above, like birds in flight, on a strange landscape, on the topography of such a place. And question what is its essential shape? And the program might be boiled down into something like a program of remembering, and maybe some of that remembering also has already come through in what I've spoken about. Program of remembering. And it's a remembering of how to slow down and to be in silence and groundedness in this age of speed and white noise and key performance indicators. So it's a program also about remembering slowness, taking our time and coming into relationship in this space of slowness with the body, with the animate earth, with the more than human community. And so slow is it that my PowerPoint is actually frozen. So there's really deep medicine in slowness. It's also about remembering ways to regulate the body in this age of trauma and despair and dissociation. So tools that can help us come out of dorsal fight, flight, freeze, and coming into this sense of space through tools that regulate. So we do some work looking at ventral vagal theory, polyvagal theory, tools to regulate both in nature, but also when we're in our own natures. And the orienting practice is one such example, a way to come back into relationship with ourselves out of frozen spaces or spaces that would be in flight. So yeah, it's about feeling safe in ourselves again. And in so doing, we can remember what it is to have a body, to come out of the quarantine of the mind, out of the exile of, addiction or deficiency stories, divorce from the body and all it holds. So this program is really also about bridging the mind-body divide, of coming back into relationship in that way with ourselves. And relationship is also part of this process, remembering what it might be to come into relationship with our many inner parts, the many inner wounded places inside of us, the ones we've disavowed or pathologized, the orphaned ones that walk those nighttime recesses of the psyche and the unconscious. And so what happens when we come into relationship with all our parts again? What does that kind of wholeness feel like? This is a program that also seeks to explore that. And at the dawn of the sixth mass extinction, there's the possibility also of remembering a different kind of belonging, a belonging with the animate earth. And it's medicine in these times of environmental collapse and the extinction of species. And perhaps because in the forgetting of our innate, intrinsic belonging and an embodied sense of connection to the earth, So much of the catastrophe that we see unfolding today unfolds from that place, from that forgetting. So this is a kind of medicine, this program, to be in conscious relationship in an embodied way with the earth. So maybe walk with me. One day on a program such as this, we might wander the land in nature, through the trees, beneath dappled sunlight in our own natures. We might be invited onto the land in a praise walk, perhaps cultivating the deep and wide-eyed innocence of the inner child. Perhaps this radiant one who existed as a child, who wondered about things and the way things existed and the mystery of place. And we might become enchanted there by a string of pearls dangling from spider silk illuminated by sunlight, or the poem, the wind-born poem as wind flows through she-oak pine needles. There's a kind of majesty and mystery in that. And in our rapture, we might become aware inside the body of something that feels light, like clouds with loft and buoyancy. Maybe it feels like liquid gold when we pause and take time to feel into the body's way of knowing that. And maybe it flows like sap. And also maybe there at the periphery of it, something else emerges that feels denser and darker and more granular. Maybe it has sharp edges, something that draws us down and in, something that feels keen like grief. Maybe it feels more than that when we stay with it and it reveals a deeper and older remembering of not having. And maybe that's the way we felt as a little one. And we may encounter there beneath that dappled sunlight an inner 5-year-old, the one who didn't have what they needed, who wasn't seen in the way they needed to be seen. Maybe this one who felt unloved, unlived, and unseen. And there, maybe for the first time, we might tend them, held also by the earth, beneath that spider silk, and really listen. In so doing, they might unfold and reveal more of themselves and feel truly heard. So I wonder if we pause there, you just stay with yourself and check into the body. How does all this land? How does the body feel right now when you take a pause? Maybe sensing into the shape of your initial intention for showing up tonight, sensing if it's changed, sensing the shape of it now, the feeling quality of that and its texture. And just giving that a breath. And then we might seg into a bit of the knowing, a little about frameworks and theory, but also in a feeling way, to know a bit more of the what. And so this part of my talk really centers on knowing and how we tend to know things in the West, at least. How in the West we primarily know through the thinking, through the mind and its logic. It's how we make sense of ourselves and our world. And I know I lived from that place, from a place of thinking from the neck up, quarantined from my body, in exile from the feeling sense of the body, in the relative safety of the mind with its abstract thoughts and beliefs, but also in the soil of judgment and the inner criticism that felt like a torrent at times, imprisoned in concepts and self-analysis or the analysis of others. And for sure, there's a bounty in thinking. It offers much to the world. But Stephen Gallagher points to other ways of knowing that we've all but forgotten about, certainly in the West. And maybe the nature-connected cultures never did forget. And so this course is also about these other ways of knowing. And Stephen Gallagher points us back home that we can three-dimensionalize how we know ourselves, our sense of connection to the earth through these different windows. And Stephen Gallagher is really lends an urgency to this. He points to the catastrophic consequences of this over-reliance on thinking. He writes, now our very lives and the life of humanity itself depend upon our ability to return to a place within ourselves where knowing is not distorted and where thinking is not confused with knowing, where the four primary modes of knowing can return to a natural balance. And he underlines the urgency of this balancing act, that if this is not accomplished, and soon this very earth will not survive. So there's something about being rusted onto this thinking way of knowing as the only way of sensing ourselves and sensing our connection or lack thereof to the earth. And maybe some of the catastrophe that unfolds today is born out of this rusted onness to knowing, to thinking. And so I might linger a bit on feeling today. And feeling and deep imagery, as well as sensing, are woven throughout this program. But I'd like to zoom in on feeling in the body. And you might put aside everything maybe that you already know about this. And I'd like to tumble into feeling again with you anew here. Maybe to recontact some of its deep mystery. In particular, a way of inner knowing and feeling that Eugene Gendlin, the founder of Focusing, describes as the felt sense. So I'd like to explore what can happen with you when we allow ourselves to move through the doorway of the felt sense, down into those midnight depths of the body. And the native mystery that can actually unfold moment by moment when we connect with it in that way, this other way of knowing, again, that we've all but forgotten. And so what is this felt sense that Eugene Gendlin points to? So I just want you to imagine, if you haven't already, just to close your eyes for a moment and imagine you're walking down a long corridor. And maybe after a time, you get to an atrium and there's two doors in front of you. And through the first door on the left, I want you to imagine that someone you deeply love and care for is waiting to see you through that doorway. And in a few moments, you're going to meet them. They're going to come through that doorway. And I want you to let yourself notice how you carry inside yourself the body feel of that person. The whole body sense that comes knowing they're about to meet you. And take a few moments to notice where in the body that emerges and the shape of it, its texture or density or color. And you might see if you can just, in the privacy of your room there, just lend a few words to see if you can describe the felt sense there. Maybe it's vast and voluminous. Maybe it's bubbly and effervescent. Finding your own language and handles, the way you can actually see if you can describe that. Stay with it and stay close to it as you do that. Maybe there's a word or, again, a symbol or imagery that kind of represents this feeling, sense of this person in your body. And if you have pen and paper nearby, you might just jot down a few of those words. And if you don't, just set them on the mind's mantelpiece. And then you might thank that person and say you'll return to them later. And then you might turn to the second doorway on the right. And this time behind that doorway, there's a difficult person, someone you would rather not bump into, someone who maybe triggers you. And you might just sense what happens in the body, knowing that you might meet them shortly. How do you carry inside yourself the body feel of that person? Just invite the whole body sense of that to come in. And take a few moments to notice where in the body that forms and the shape of it, its texture and density. And maybe there's a few words there or a symbol that represents that felt sense of them. And you might jot that down on a paper or just put it on the mantelpiece beside the other words. And then you might just take a few moments, maybe thanking that person, if that feels right to do so. And then coming back into the atrium, both doors are closed. And then just sensing into the different feeling sense of each person in the body. We're beginning here to feel into the felt sense of something, a situation, a person, but just noticing that how they showed up differently. And maybe there were also many associations that initially came when I named both of those people, but that something else emerged in the body when you turned inward. And with a little bit of slowness that the timing of this talk allows, invited the sense of that person to come in there. Maybe noticing the difference here versus a felt sense of a person you love and a felt sense of a person who's difficult. And maybe there's some emotion that comes with that. And the felt sense often lies beneath the emotion, and it's often hard to describe. So maybe you did find yourselves grappling to really get a handle on something that's really rather nebulous, this wash of feeling emotion. But maybe there's also a sense of the depth of it, that maybe if there had been more time, more of it might have been revealed. And in that way, the felt sense is also like a Mandelbrot, this form that's perpetually inviting us into the something more of itself, the something more of a situation or person or trigger, far more than the mind can conceptualize. There can be thousands of different strange and nebulous feeling senses captured in the one feeling sense around that one person. The other thing about the feeling sense or the felt sense there is that it holds within it, Eugene Genlin writes, that it holds within it a life forward energy. When we stay with it and tend it, and in this program, this focusing component of this program with you, we'll learn how to come into deeper relationship with the felt sense. It contains within it the next step. The mystery of it opens and unfurls like a bud and reveals more. And it contains the next step in that moment, in that relationship, in our life. And so when we enter into this way of knowing, this embodied feeling sense, the felt sense way of knowing, we stand on the edge of an unfolding mystery. And so much becomes possible from that way of knowing ourselves, but also the more than human other, the animate earth. Much more than we might think is possible with the thinking mind. So what happens when we fuse together focusing in a relationship, feeling, sensing in this way with something like ecotherapy? In this program, we'll be combining the two and we'll be exploring different kinds of ecotherapy, but always combining them with the body's feeling sense, but also the deep imaginal, which I didn't talk about, the other way of knowing. So there's different kinds of ecotherapy. And in one kind, what we're doing, we're taking often, if you work with clients, or maybe just aspects of yourself, we're working with a traumatized system, a system that's filled up with split off or fragmented parts that feel frozen or in flight or in some kind of catastrophe. And so the entry-level ecotherapy is learning how to be with ourselves and to regulate the nervous system. So to come into deeper relationship by regulating, coming out of sympathetic or dorsal into ventral vagal. So that's the sort of the primary doorway that we start with in ecotherapy, in this culture of fight and flee, how we can have more of ourselves, how we can actually bear to tune inward and turn inward and tend what's there. And when we can regulate ourselves in that way, when we have a tool such as focusing and a way of unraveling the felt sense, we can have more of that medicinal state of regulation and unfold more of it, incorporating a different way of being. And then leaning into Bill Plotkin's work, Bill's wild mind work, for instance, we can cultivate a different or explore a different kind of ecotherapy that then invites in or invokes the archetypal facets of wholeness of the human psyche, facets of human wholeness that when we connect with them, we, from that place, from an embodied sense of connection to those archetypal facets, such as the innocent, the wild indigenous one, the dark muse beloved, the generative nurturing adult, when we can connect with those ones, from that place, we can heal. Healing flows naturally. There's a kind of alchemy that occurs when we embody and situate ourselves in those archetypal facets. And we can learn or remember what it is to be more wild or more sensual, more playful, more generative. So that's a kind of an archetypal work on the land that we can do, held by the animate earth. Healing that flows naturally by connecting with these inner natural resources of the psyche. And so from those places, we can start to tend and call home those orphaned ones that walk the nighttime avenues of our psyche, metabolizing or leaning into or listening or holding them and calling them back home into the family of our wholeness, out of the dark, out of the frozen places in us. And sometimes those are parts and places of us that terrified us or that we could not bear to claim or to look at. But with this kind of wild holding with ecotherapy and the wild holding of focusing, it becomes possible to hold all of our parts with a kind of big mind that starts to understand the depth of each of those parts. We start to know them from their own side. And this is an alchemical quickening. We stand in our own gnarliness. We stand in our own brilliancy and radiance and darkness. And we reclaim what ancient cultures might have projected out into the gods and into the divine, and we can find it back in our own body. We can reclaim that. The wild, destructive potency of Kali is a goddess known as never not broken. We can stand in her power, in the radiance of the wound itself. We can stand in the wild, wide-eyed innocence of the dancing god Krishna, be in the radiance of that. All these places in us can be reclaimed, and the energy that's ours, the life energy they hold, can be rejoined, welcomed back into the family of wholeness. And so we're bridging the divide here between the stories the mind holds about us and the energies the body has about all of that. The somatic, contracted, frozen places and all the words and deficiency stories and images, object relations. So what happens when we start to move through that kind of work, working through the layered sediment of our inner wounded places? Well, at the dawn of the sixth mass extinction, these wounded and frozen and fragmented or places in flight tend to give us a sense of separateness, a sense of isolation naturally. And when we start to work through these places, a different kind of ecotherapy becomes possible, which is the ecotherapy of belonging. And on one level, this may feel like kind of an affinity, a feeling of love for the earth, a feeling of kinship with nature, protectiveness, wanting to protect those wild and fragile places. That's one kind of belonging, a movement towards. But there's another kind of ecotherapy of belonging that's deeper yet, and it's something far more intimate. When those places that yield a sense of being separate are metabolized and called home, they start to blur, and the sense of ourselves becomes more porous, and we get what people describe as a betweenness of the felt sense when we're in nature. The betweenness of self and nature, self and other, self and cosmos becomes possible. Not in an esoteric or thinking way, but in an embodied feeling way of being connected, but also the possibility that what we're feeling isn't purely our own. When we're not so preoccupied with our wounding and our self-contractions, something else becomes possible. We can sense something else. There's a possibility of remembering that the body is always connected. It's always in an intricate web, and always in relationship with the 10,000 things. And one of my mentors, Janine Marie Van Haugen, was in conversation with David Abram, the ecologist, and they were talking about the interpenetration of consciousness, the fact that we have conscious mind, pre-conscious, unconscious, beneath that, the collective unconscious field, then planetary consciousness, and beneath all of it is cosmic consciousness, the consciousness, the unitary consciousness, universal consciousness. And she said, well, if this is true, and if all these layers of consciousness interpenetrate, then what is the earth doing in this time of environmental collapse? At the dawn of the sixth mass extinction, what's she doing? And David Abram simply said, she's sending us big dreams. So perhaps some of this deep grief and this vast longing that erupts in us in a time such as this is not purely our own. Perhaps it's also of the more than human other and the animal earth also. And this feeling sense we can connect with when we pause and regulate, holding all of ourselves, feeling our sit bones on the earth and our feet connected to the earth. There was a time not long ago when I was in Sydney walking through those amazing Moreton Bay fig trees in Hyde Park, and it's like this cathedral, this jeweled green cathedral of trees, and this green light just flowing down. And all around me is the buzz of traffic, but somewhere inside there was this sense of silence that felt like it had a gravity in my body. And I sat on one of those vast roots of those vast Moreton Bay fig trees, and I just read this paper by Merleau-Ponty, who's a focusing practitioner and a philosopher. And this sense of maybe this embodied gravitational silence is not purely my own. Maybe something of that is also of these trees, the vastness of these trees with this jeweled green light and the sap that slowly flows in them. And there's this great mystery then that unfolds, this great mystery that becomes possible as we become more porous, as we come into deeper connection with. And we come through the doorway of the felt sense and also the deep imaginal, which this program also explores. And there's a beautiful quote here by Merleau-Ponty. As I contemplate the blue of the sky, I abandon myself to it and plunge into this mystery. It thinks itself within me. I am the sky itself as it's drawn together and unified, and as it begins to exist for itself. My consciousness is saturated, with this limitless blue. So that's the ecotherapy of belonging. And we can go deeper yet into transpersonal ecotherapy, at which point the light changes on our journey and we enter a different topography. We follow the fishing line of the felt sense through the layers of psyche and soma, through what may be the calling and the longing and the grief of the earth. We can move deeper into transpersonal dimensions in a ecotherapy such as this. And this program touches into those areas. It shows the scope of the terrain. Bill Plotkin, in addition to his wild mind work, forged his soulcraft offering. And this is a very specific definition of soul, which is the truth at the center of the image one is born with. We can follow the lines down into the deep subterranean rivers of soul, finding the patterns that constellate our soul and that constellate for process workers, the life myth, these patterns that show up again and again in our deepest grief and our wounds, our sacred wounds, our relationship patterns. In the wild folds of nature, we can track those patterns to know more of ourselves. And at some point, some people are called into the underworld to have soul encounter at a certain stage of development. And it's also possible, following that thread down through the doorway of the felt sense and the deep imaginal, to encounter a different transpersonal terrain that's also embodied. It's the embodiedness of our own sacred dimensions of being. It's an inner divinity down into the ocean of being. And this is the terrain of somatic spirituality that A.H. Almas, the founder of the Diamond Approach, has offered into the world. This is a kind of spirituality that's embodied, that's flesh and blood real, that lives moment by moment in the fabric of the body, and that can be encountered through the doorway of the felt sense. So this isn't a spirituality that's about ideology or blind faith or ivory towers. It's feeling, sensing in the body, knowing ourselves as aspects of radiant innocence or melting gold or primordial will. So this renders a kind of spirituality that feels profoundly tangible, and it can be embodied when we walk through a field of trees, connecting into the deeper felt sense there, being in conversation with the more than human other from the different parts and places of us. And this is what A.H. Almas or Arnie Mindell, the founder of Process Work, describes as a kind of conversation with the dance, or being in the dance of the ancient one, the forces that animate the universe, through these deep portals of feeling, sense in the body and the deep imaginal. It becomes possible to participate in these macro dances, these macro patterns of the universe, these interplays of archetypal energies that gather us into a vast unfolding. And if all of that sounds highfalutin, then sometimes we're just walking, carrying our wounded places, just in the wound, holding the inner grief, the felt sense of that, perhaps taking solace in the branches of a broken and fire-scorched tree that echoes something of our own brokenness. Yeah, situating ourselves in our own living truth right there, honoring what is true. Looking at the time, there's a beautiful Mary Oliver poem called Wild Geese, which I invite you to read after this, which is about loving what the soft animal of your body loves. So it's a poem of authenticity and feeling in the body. And so we might pause there and sense into the body again, how it's feeling, what shapes emerge, hearing that. And then I'll land with the final page, which after all of that feels awfully contracted somehow and heavy with words, but it's the nutshell page of this program, which is 9 months. Maybe it's a gestation of some kind into the depths of us. And it's truly holistic in that it's encompassing the different facets of the psyche, conscious and unconscious. It's also encompassing or walking the divide between mind and body and beyond the skin bag to explore what it might mean to truly know we belong in an embodied way to the animate earth. And it weaves together these two profound paradigms in their own right that are healing: somatic inquiry, and this program will be looking at focusing as a way to do that, and also ecotherapy. And underneath that, it's propped up by 10 modalities that include some of Scott Killerby's repression work, or that the scope of that will look at the nature of Plotkin's soulcraft, and we'll dive into wild mind. So some of these areas we dive into and spend longer on, and other areas we're looking at the scope of this kind of work. And to our knowledge, there's no other program that offers this kind of weaving. And so we're really excited to be offering this. And it's a mix of online Zoom sessions, which initially will be weekly as we move through the focusing component. And then later, as we transition into the ecotherapy component, they are spaced fortnightly, which gives longer for people to be on the land with the specific invitations. So each Zoom call each week has a different module of learning. There may be assigned reading, but there's always different exercises that you'll either be doing in dyads with the focusing, you'll be focusing in dyads, really coming into direct connection with the felt sense, learning how to be embodied in that way and to come into relationship with more of you. And then when you're wandering the land, you'll be doing it solo. If you choose to do so, you may wish to wander with another. And then it all culminates in this 5-day nature-based intensive on the land with me. So we'll gather as a wild council on the land. And we'll be putting into practice everything we've been learning. And we'll be following the threads that emerge there from country, from between, the marrow of each of us, sometimes emerging in night dreams, sometimes emerging in wanders, in a praise walk on the land. So this is really a coming together at the end of it all and sitting in the bounty of all of it. So there'll be some theory, some assigned reading. There's no assignments per se, and there's no essays. So this really is about embodied experience. It's an invitation to really practice these tools and to take your time to taste them. And my hope is that some of these tools will become lifelong tools. It's a program for therapists, for those who want to become a therapist, and also anyone who's interested in this kind of depth work. So that's the end of my speaking. I'll stop the presentation. We've got a bit of time. Anyone who needs to go, because we are almost at the hour, feel free to go. Thank you for being here. And if you want, I can hang back for a bit if there's any questions. And then we'll also share the recording if you can't catch the questions at the end. So asked to confirm my speaking language.
That was brilliant. Thank you, Rob. Any questions? You just raise your hand if you.
And there's no pressure also to ask. So
Lucy has a question.
Lucy.
Hello. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah.
I feel like I want to join just so I can listen to you talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly. Have you decided what night you'd be meeting for the Zoom sessions?
That's a really great question. So that detail of logistics will be launched. Yeah, currently it's posted as Wednesdays, Wednesday evenings. So yeah, assume Wednesdays. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks for that. Oh, there's some stuff in the chat too. I'll just have a look. Oh yeah. Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you. I think they've had to jump off. Anyone else have any questions? Everyone's gone shy.
I'll just say thank you, Rob. That was awesome. And I laughed at Lucy's comment because I felt the same way. I only noticed you had an English accent about halfway through because I was just completely lulled into it. So
Thank you.
I mean, you might have already given us this answer, to be fair, because I think that we probably birth anything in that kind of, well, I don't know, my belief is that sort of reconciliation of our own journey, and you've already told us yours. But if you had kind of an avatar of a person that you were thinking this would offer so much to someone who was in this space, like who would they be? If there was somebody that you thought, I really hope I could take this type of person on this journey, because there's so much in it. I just wondered if you had somebody, or if you had their journey in mind when you wrote it.
Yeah, that's great, that question. And no is the answer. It's like who doesn't want to be embodied? Yeah, that's my question, is who doesn't want that? And for good reason, sometimes we don't want to be embodied. And so maybe this course sometimes isn't for people who aren't ready to come into connection with themselves in that way. You know, trauma likes to move fast, and we're frozen for good reason. So, but yeah, there's just from where I'm sitting, there's a richness in coming into connection in that way, and a sense of meaning and purpose and direction, and also mystery. Like this world where, yeah, mystery is all but evaporated, you know, in this constant doom scrolling. So who doesn't want to be embodied? Who doesn't want to live in some kind of mystery? Yeah, but maybe you have a person in mind that would benefit.
Well, me.
Yeah, there it is.
When you said at the beginning, you're like lived from the neck up, and it's interesting because I don't know if anybody else felt this, but I really felt the tussle in me between the kind of seduction into the invitation and the dreaming and the mystery and the whimsical and the all that felt unfeeling, and the part that was like, but I still don't totally get the factual until the last slide, when you were like, and then there'll be 10 things here, and then we'll be doing this, and I was like, aha, there it is. And I get the humor in that fully, but that's why I asked you that question.
Yes, thank you for naming that. Also, there's the intention of this is not to completely shun thinking at all. It's just to three-dimensionalize. And on the website, there's more detail on the different stages of the journey. And there will also be released nearer to the kind of launch. There'll be a kind of a sort of syllabus, so a bit more granular detail. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Great, thank you so much.
Thanks, Katie. We'll get to you, Maggie. Sorry, Mary just posted a question in the chat. She has a house full of people, so she can't really talk.
Okay.
She's just asked, as a depth hypnosis therapist and counsellor, will this provide methods to integrate with clients in session?
I mean, I'm not a hypnotherapist. So this program is also written with potential therapists in mind. So the intention will be for each week, there'll be various tools that you're exploring and embodying and practicing that I'm in no doubt you'll be able to bring into your practice. So for sure, like tiny example, that simple orienting thing that we did right at the beginning is so powerful in this age of rushing and kind of trying to get through and power through. But the simple slowness of that is a simple example, but there'll be lots of different tools. So I'm pretty confident there'll be a whole bunch of things you can bring to bear for your clients. Yeah, that was the initial intention. It was a CPD training, this program.
Perfect. Thank you. She's saying thank you. Maggie?
Hi, thank you very much for that, Rob. It's really powerful and very intriguing and attractive. I guess I don't really have a question, but more a feeling a little discomfort in that I believe everyone here tonight are women. I don't think there are any men here, are there? Any?
Yeah.
And whilst you were speaking, I was really getting a stronger sense that there's a real distance between what you're saying, even though just about all your references were to male theorists and thinkers and philosophers. It's all women here tonight, and I feel like there is a disconnect. If we're talking about healing and relationship, we don't have any men here tonight that are really engaging in this kind of approach, and yet that we're drawing on the ideas of men, and it just feels like a disconnect for me that I have to try and reconcile. But I was wondering if there was anything anyone might be able to say or speak to about this. I don't feel like we can heal or connect to the earth if we don't have a portion of our humanity here alongside us, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I noted also the absence of men in session tonight. Yeah, and recognizing, thank you for pointing out that most of my references were male, happen to be male, and that's not deliberate on my part, and maybe that's the lineages I've been trained with. I referenced Janine Marie van Hougen, who was my mentor. Yeah, and my sense here also is that there's a wanting also to kind of explore how these teachings sit with you, and what it means for you to come into connection with the body, and to be in relationship with the earth in some of the ways we've talked about, and to bring your perspective. So I'm really open to hear from students as they participate in this program.
It wasn't meant as a criticism. I mean, you also mentioned poetry by Mary Oliver and whatnot, but it's just, if you're looking to become a healer and therapist, there is a absence here, or an absence of, we've got a male perspective and not the, and it's not a balanced, or no, I don't know. I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's just a general sense of discomfort that I'm feeling.
But, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for airing that, Maggie. Just to speak on behalf of Metavision, about 80% of our students are female, which might interest you. So it's just, I guess, women are called to these sorts of it's just, I noticed that as well.
I'm not surprised, but I think my feeling is disappointment, I suppose, because the importance of it is very much present, but we're not quite there.
No, but acknowledging it is the first step. So I'm glad that you spoke up about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anina, thanks for waiting.
It's okay. Just in that previous comment, I feel like in a lot of the embodiment spaces and personal development spaces I've been in, it tends to be quite female heavy, but yes, one day that will shift. My question, I mean, the course sounds fantastic and I'm super interested. I'm wondering, and this is perhaps more of like one of those knowing, like structural practical questions, but like at completion of this course, is there the type of certificate, or like, I guess, how should I say it? Like, if I was to do this course, can I put myself forward as, is there like any type of like certificate or something that one can name, or like a particular modality that one can name to have mastered at the end of it? And I know that's kind of silly because it sounds like there's a lot of tools and great things that come through from it, but in terms of like them perhaps attracting clients into this type of work, would you say that this is like a standalone piece, or would you recommend that this is sort of a supplement, and then there would be a benefit to study other forms of psychotherapy or other pieces to be competent enough to hold these spaces?
Yeah, I'm not sure of your background. I'm hearing maybe you're not already a therapist in that. So this, yeah, it's a really great question, and accreditation is something we're looking into. Given this is early stages in the program, there'll definitely be a certificate of completion from Metavision in somatic ecopsychotherapy. It doesn't qualify you as a psychotherapist or an ecotherapist or a focusing teacher or anything like that. I think the way it was originally conceived was as a sort of continuing professional development for existing therapists. But then when I was in conversation with Metavision, it became clear that the nature of this program would also benefit people wanting to do their own inner work as well. So there's a kind of a inner development process which therapists alike would also be participating in. But there is, yeah, so that's probably all the information I've got at this stage on certification.
Yeah, that's cool.
You also get personal development hours from it as well on the certificate that you can use.
Yeah.
To accumulate.
How many hours did you say, Kate?
I'm not sure of the number of hours. Rob, are you?
I think so. It's around 70 hours. So there's a lot of CPD. But
smash that out over 2 years.
Yeah,
Meet them every year.
Yeah. We're also it depends also what field you're in. So if I'm speaking from a kind of psychotherapy angle, but if you're a nurse, it depends on what the requirements of your peak body are to get kind of whether it would count as CPD. So I think we would just need to have a conversation with people who are interested in using it for CPD to work out what's possible, what you're needing, what the requirements are. Yeah.
What's the time investment recommended kind of time investment per week, like in terms of practices or?
Yeah, so the Zoom calls are generally 2 hours, and then between Zoom calls around 2 hours a week, and that's for kind of just going through any reading materials. There aren't always reading materials, but if there are, going through those, and then mainly actually for taking the practices into your focusing dyads. It's really important to kind of practice the different stages of focusing basically in partnerships. And then in the ecotherapy component, really to take your time and be on the land as much as you're able. And I recognize everyone's busy. So sometimes it's not a bushwalk, sometimes it's a park, sometimes it's just being on a balcony with, access to views of nature. But it's encouraged to be in wild nature during that program also, when that's possible.
Well, thank you.
Anyone else? What about any of our listeners that don't have their video on? Did they want to pop on and ask a question? No. All right. Well, we might let you all go. How do you feel about that, Rob? Yeah. The details are on our website. It's all live on there now. There's an application form, the pricing's on there, all the details. So you have a little read. I popped it in a link in the email I sent everyone with the reminder for tonight. But if you do have any questions, please feel free to reach out to Metavision. I'll probably be the one here answering the calls or the emails. And if you do have any specific questions that you would like Rob to answer, please email me through and I can pass them on to Rob for you. So yeah, there is an early bird rate on the website at the moment as well. If you are a Metavision alumni, there is a discounted rate for yourselves as well. It's all on there. So yeah, so have a little look and let me know if anyone has any questions. Thanks, guys. Thanks for taking time out tonight to meet with us. Thank you, Rob.
Well, thanks, everyone. Really appreciate your time. All right. See ya.
Thank you.